Okay, we're live streaming. I am going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to remind council and municipal staff that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. All council meetings are also recorded. Recordings will be available to the public on the township's YouTube account. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is restricted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is held electronically under Bylaw 2020-70 to amend Procedural Bylaw 2018-117 pursuant to Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended. The purpose of the meeting today, the Council for the Township of Madawaska Valley deems it advisable to hold a special council meeting as allowable under Section 3.6.4 of the Procedural Bylaw 2018-117. And just before we get started, I'd like to do the First Nations land acknowledgement. As we gather today, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. And we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. All right, we will move to the adoption of the agenda for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. Sue, there's no additions to the agenda, is there?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation is that the special council meeting agenda for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Pawlinski, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. All those in favor? And that's carried. Any declarations of pecuniary interest this morning?
None.
Okay,
None here.
I'm seeing none. So with that, we'll move straight to our delegation, and we have Nick Larson with us from Ontario Clean Water Agency, and he's here regarding our asset management plan. Nick, great to see you. Glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Take it away.
Okay, awesome. So I guess just the first question, has anybody had a chance to flip through the draft report?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to do is share a screen. So one of the things that we wanted to do, since I was here, was to give you a sense of your new facility data that has come in over the past year. So I have another monitor here, so please excuse my lack of eye contact. I'm sorry, I'm looking over here, but I'm still here and I'm still focused. Okay, so earlier this year, you had a team of engineers from another consultant company. So this wasn't from Ontario Clean Water Agency, but another building expert toured all of your facilities and came up with, I'll show you the overall spreadsheets here, but you've got, bear with me. So you've got a spreadsheet for every single one of your facilities, okay? And so the spreadsheet that I have open is just one of those spreadsheets. So this happens to be the library. And what they've done, I'll zoom in a bit. Tell me when it's big enough to read.
Okay, we can read it.
Okay, so the way to think of how you look at a facility is they're trying to break up its components into certain categories of assets. So every row here represents a discrete thing, like this is the block wall of the library, this is the foundations of the library, this is the slab, this is the roof, these are the brick veneer walls. And they do sort of categorize them to say this is the substructure or the shell and that sort of thing. So what they've done is they've put a lot of information in here, which is related to an overall comment on the state of every asset. So in this case, the roof, you can see the sentence, the roof structure was found to be in fair condition. The ice guards at the south and west sides, there are ice guards. So it's saying that's good. So there are ice guards. So this is a lot of high quality information that we can use. And so Hillary and I have gone through this with your staff. Really, and I'm not going to say this lightly, row by row for all of your facilities. So what we were able to do is to say, because I think if you appreciate the Elliott Lake Mall roof issue, I guess, that happen if you're familiar with that story or the information around it, which was there had been some assessments of this parking garage roof in the mall in Elliott Lake, and they had at the owner's request taken off some of the more things that were saying this is bad, you need to spend money, and very frowned upon in our professional engineering industry. And so what you find is that engineers by their nature are conservative when they do these things, similar to when I presented the water and wastewater AMP and we got into talking about dewatering at the water plant, and we said, well, conservatively, we're going to say you need it, you might not need it this year or next year, but it's going to be there on the list. And similarly, that's the same kind of lens through which you need to interpret this information, and that's what Hillary and I have done with your facility manager at the PYJCC, row by row, do we agree that this actually needs to happen? Or do we agree that this can happen in a couple years or a couple years later? So that sort of massaging of the original recommendations has already been done within the asset management plan. And I'll just show you what that looks like when we get all of your information together on your buildings. So here's your facilities. I will zoom in, sorry about this. And so we've got all of our facilities here. I'll just zoom over so you can believe me. So here's every single facility is in here, broken up into about 1,000 different rows of all your different components. And so when we get into discussions around the facilities, this is always the type of stuff we can go back to and say specifically, what is the amount of money that's being recommended on this facility and for what and on what? It's all back to here when we start talking about the overall summary. So what the summary looks like, and this is one of the reports in the graph, or sorry, one of the graphs in the report. So this is your, over the next 5 years, this is your recommended spending by facility. Okay, so a couple of observations that I put in, a kind of a broad comment in the executive summary was, figure out which of these facilities, because through the discussions we heard, say, the Combermere Community or the Golden Year Center, I think, is rarely used or not planned to be used very much. And so I would say what I've recommended is sort of put your buildings into the ones that we know are going to stay in their current general design for the foreseeable future, like Municipal Hall. And it's going to stay, it's not going to have a huge expansion, and then those are the projects to move forward with, for the facilities that are going to stay. Something like the library, so you see there's $380,000 worth of work recommended at the library, which is essentially a full gut, right? And so until such time as we've decided we want the library rebuilt, where it is, how it is, if that decision has been made, then I would say move forward with some of the improvements to the library. But if that hasn't been made, and I got the sense with the library that maybe that hasn't been decided yet, then I would say you don't have to jump out and spend 400 grand on the library, because it's things like, it's got an old heating system, replace the heating system. Well, it's worked in its current state for the past, and if we're talking about waiting a few more years to come up with a plan for the library, then that's totally fine. We don't need to jump to gutting the library and spending the money on it, okay? But obviously you see the PYJCC there. You got your $1.2 million floor slab project. That's one that needs to happen, and we're recommending that it move forward in line with your plans for next year. So that's just sort of the lens through which we've tried to interpret your facility data. It hasn't just been a blind, this was the information, it goes in here, and this is the report, or this is the recommendation. So there has been, that sort of lens taken on this recommended spending level. But I think you'll see there's a lot of work out there in your facilities. And so what that means when you look at sort of your overall performance is that facilities is your largest proportion of assets in the poor performance category, which means that, again, something needs to be done on those assets for them to go from poor to good. That's our asset management approach. And so when you combine, the fact that facilities is your second largest asset portfolio, almost, $17 million, and with the largest proportion in poor, you get your facilities being your single largest area where you have assets that are requiring attention. So that's, again, you have really good high quality building data now. And it's a lot of information there through which to start prioritizing what we do to the facilities, what we do first, second, third, and really trying to get a handle on, I'll use the overall, maybe it's a small M&P for master plan, but what's the facilities master plan? I don't think you need to jump out and hire a consultant, but Amanda and I were saying that, a nice grant on the front half of your arena and a rec center and an arena and a library all put together would go a long way to checking a lot of these needs off your list. And so that's just sort of the idea of kind of the master plan of figuring out, what are the services you need to provide at the facilities that you've got, and really where do we start making sure we can most efficiently make the investments we know aren't going to be, I don't use the word thrown away, but that we know that facilities in their current state are going to be there for the next 20 years. Prioritize those investments while the plan for the other facilities is brought into focus. Okay. Any questions on the facilities? Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Vaplinski.
Yes, through you, Mayor Love. Nick, a very good report. I'm just wondering, it would be very helpful, and I may have missed it in here, but I don't see it, would be the overall cost of replacement of that particular building.
Of what particular building? Sorry.
We're talking about the library.
The library, the total cost of the library, yes. So that isn't reported in there, but I can tell you that. I think it's 800,000 they had. Let me just tell you quickly. Okay. So we go over here, and this is their current replacement costs for the library. Yeah, they had $806,000 was their full.
Now, without, I didn't see it on any of the other reports either. So is that something that's not normally included? Because we're dealing with the asset management big time, of course, dealing with insurance purposes. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that the insurance companies that's selling us the product are trying to convince us that we need coverage, full replacement coverage on every building every year. And I take a little different approach with that. Mm-hmm. And for obvious reasons, because we couldn't possibly continue to pay the fee premiums. It's out of skyrocketed right now to the point where we have to look at this. But if we follow that advice in the interest of good asset management, then obviously there's an issue, because unless there's a major catastrophe that every building gets destroyed, then we won't be here anyway. So why are we, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think we need a real common sense approach to this.
Right.
So
absolutely.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it in on these reports. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
So Nick, could you provide us after the meeting at some point with the actual total replacement cost of each of these facilities? I know that probably we could sit down and add up the spreadsheets we've received. I looked at that on the weekend and went, no, I'm not spending my time on that.
That's why you have me.
Exactly, because you could click a button, stick it, and say sum, and away you go.
Yeah, so. Exactly. I could do it pretty quickly, sort of almost in real time. But yes, so it's really easy to do. You have the information in there, and it's really just a matter of me clicking a different button here and giving you that information. So
okay, no, that would be great.
Through the chair to the councillor's question. So no, I mean, typically we report on the replacement value of the portfolio. And so that's in the report, but there's no reason why one can't also provide the breakdown by facility. So that's easy, and it's in there. And the other comment I would make about insurance valuations, because I've spent a lot of my career in the public sector accounting board, kind of valuing assets through PSAB and then doing insurance valuations and coming up with replacement costs, is like $806,000 for your library is, the cost to build a library of current standard of the same size. So it's not necessarily if you had a catastrophic, to rebuild the library, so they have something called insurable exclusion, so you don't have to dig the hole for the foundation again. So they start, when insurance companies get into what is the insurable value and what do we want to do it, I agree with the point that it doesn't make sense to insure for an $806,000 library if you had a flood or something, a broken pipe or something, or a fire, and you had to rebuild the library, you wouldn't be into 800 grand. You'd probably be more into the 400 grand that they've recommended you spend to gut the library. So that's probably the number. So I'm not an insurance valuation expert, but I understand the frustrations. We're dealing with it with Aqua as well, with premiums going up, and then looking at replacement values of in asset management planning purposes versus insurable values. So it's a complex topic.
Okay. All right, Nick, is there any way, like, do you have similar spreadsheets for the PJYCC? Because it's the only facility that we don't have in this format.
So yes, so you actually had old PYJCC data that from a one-off assessment, and so I brought that into it. So you've got
Okay.
down here. Well, I forgot I actually spelled the whole thing here, but yes, it's in here, and I'll show you just how we take the data into your one. So this is your entire PYJCC here, and then what we've done over here is you can see here these are your costs in 2022. So here's your $1.2 million for the slab, and if I add up all the other rows, you're going to get your total will be 3.5 million, because we've had that discussion where you've had, you know, your report on what the full arena project would be versus what's just the slab and boards. So right now we're just doing slab and boards next year, but the total for all these things when we decide to put them in a certain year will add up to your full project. So if you get the grant application and it materializes and we want to hustle and say, let's put this in the short term, it's easy enough for us to say, yes, let's just bring all this stuff, make it poor, bring it in. I won't make any changes because I'll forget what I changed, but it's easy for us to bring it back in, and all the data is here for the PYJCC.
Okay, great.
And then just so we won't go through them all, but you know, the other comment that I would make, generally speaking, overall, the big kind of difference that I point out is that our number for the roads is coming in lower than your last 2019 road need study. So just to dwell on the roads, because they're your second biggest asset portfolio, I wanted to give you a sense of what the annual improvements are going to look like behind the scenes that we're doing. So what you're going to see here is there was, you know, you had a condition rating at the time. So this is the current performance of each road segment. If you're familiar with what you're looking at here, you've got a spreadsheet of your, I think there's 223 here rows, which represent your road network. Each road represents a segment. This is the length of the segment, and this is an important field here. This is the average annual daily traffic on the road segment. So this gives you a sense of, is there, you know, less 49 is the lowest number in our engineering world. So it means less than 50 cars per day. And then everything else will give you an estimate. And I don't know if they actually laid down the little pneumatic things that you drive over to count cars, but if you've ever driven over like those rubber rumble strips, that's what they're doing, is they're counting how many vehicles. So whether you had a proper vehicle count or not, this is an estimate of the daily traffic. So what we've been able to do, you can see here these comments. And so we've worked with Amanda and gone through the list of capital projects. And if I just flip through here quickly, you can see this is the one that was at a 48% or a PQI that was pretty low. And in this year, we spent 336 on Pog Lake Road, and you can see it went from a fair to a good condition. So now it's in, and we can show this. Here's one that's still on your 1 to 5 year road need study, not done yet. So this is Mintha Street. Hopefield Road. Hopefield Road is still a segment that was on your road need study. So we've gone through the list of priority segments again. So when you see this comment on road need study 1 to 5 year list, not done yet, this is again the other section of Hopefield Road. So this is the, sorry.
Nick?
Yes, that was Hillary.
Hillary?
Yeah, just a question while we're in here. I have to move into Andy's office. I couldn't deal with it in mine.
Okay.
So I'm Andy for today.
Hey, Andy.
For now. We should include Lakewoods Drive and Skeets Road. Let's clean that up moving forward.
You mean you mean new assets that need to get in there?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. Yes.
We'll clean that up in the next few days. Thank you.
And the last time we also had a discussion about a seniors condo or apartment that's being built and heavy dump trucks, then you're going to want to do the road as soon as that construction is done. I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah, we can clean up all the little bits like that for sure. So definitely new segments.
Make a note for Birchview. We have to add that in.
Okay.
Okay, these
Every
are
two-
recently about to be assumed or completed roads.
Excellent. Okay, let
Thank you.
me, uh,
I'll just comment. So we'll do that at the end of the year when we have to report on our capital assets with all of the additions or disposals in for 2021.
yeah, we just, so, but there are some new, the new segments is definitely something to add. Thanks, Amanda. So new segments. Sorry, Hilly, what else did we say? New segments? I think that was it, right? And then Birchfield. Yeah.
Keed
Okay.
Road, Lakewoods Drive, and Birchview.
Okay.
I'll remember them next.
Yeah. No, I'm okay. I'll just make new segments, add to road. Sorry, I'm just making my notes too. Okay, awesome. So, sorry, question?
Sorry, Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, through you, Mayor Love. My question to Nick. First of all, you're reading from a report and I see it online here. I don't have it in my package. So
No.
is that something that was meant to be included?
This spreadsheet itself. So
Yes.
I submitted the plan, and now we can get into looking at the data. So what I've suggested, what I see here is, so this was the summary I was kind of making. I was showing you the data behind this paragraph here. So what I've said is that,
So if, pardon me, but my question was, were we supposed to, as councilors, we're supposed to see this? Like have a copy of it?
No. This is the data, all the spreadsheets behind the asset management plan.
Yeah, this is very, very important because it's exactly what I've been raising the issue about the road, some of the road conditions. And of course, people have been referring to the asset management plan and also the roads needs study as being the basis of what we're putting on our report. The roads needs study only covers certain aspects of those roads. It does not deal with safety. It only deals, if you're familiar with the roads study.
Mhm.
And we went through an exercise with them and reviewed it. And I was quite alarmed actually, because their only duty was to go down the road, count the kilometers, record that, count the condition of the pavement, and make a decision as to how many cracks and bumps and when it may need to be replaced. Is that your understanding of what they do?
correct, yes, that's my understanding of what they do.
Okay,
Yes,
and it's
very much
probably
so.
also your understanding that the other aspects of that particular requirement should be performed by our own engineers and our own staff, dealing with the safety for pedestrians, the safety for in areas where there's no shoulders and so on. Is that your understanding?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so
Yep.
in this preliminary report that you're referring to, does it include any information from our own people about their assessment of these roads?
Their assessments is in additional spending outside of the road needs, not as of yet, no. So there are, I think
So
to clarify, the sidewalks are in here because there's been an active transportation sort of master plan or some strategic planning around the need to make improvements to the sidewalks. But no, there's yet to be, and there's easy, and we can incorporate segment by segment deficiencies for your roads that are different or on top of what's in the road need study. So that is again the point of the difference between the road need study and the asset management plan is that we want to say your road need study is saying, these are the roads that are, we'll say, too bumpy, not smooth enough. And therefore we need to add on top of that other improvements that the community wants to see on their roads, including wider shoulders for some places if there's a cycling community, or for all the right reasons there are improvements that we'd like to see. We can incorporate them into the asset management plan.
So
Nick-
so if I may, so at this point in time, you don't have any information on specific roads, information from our staff saying such and such a road needs attention because of lack of whatever, because of safety issues. So you wouldn't have any of that information at this point.
We haven't had a row by row discussion on that topic with staff as of yet. No, we've looked at just the road need study data and what work has been done.
So if in a situation we had some roads where there's no shoulders for people to walk on, would that be of a concern to you?
Councillor Faflinski, I don't think it's a question of whether it's a concern to Nick. I think what Nick is
Well, he's doing
providing
the,
is the
he's doing
Yes.
the report.
but he has provided the foundation for this information to be input into. So this is a starting point, and our staff can then work with Nick to add this additional information into this, into these spreadsheets so that it's available and at our fingertips. So it's not a question whether or not Nick thinks X or Y should be done. I'm sorry, Nick, I don't want you put
Yes.
on the spot that way.
Agreed. Yeah.
It's about building on what we have here so that what our staff and council feels are priorities can also be identified, especially issues of safety in specific areas. So that still needs to be done.
Precisely.
But this
Okay.
is where we now have the tool to put it into so that it can be identified and prioritized.
Correct.
That's what this is.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay,
That,
so
that was my concern, and thank you. You've explained it, and I look forward to the day when we have that other additional information. Thank you.
Absolutely.
okay, so we'll have discussion as council and with our staff about anything specific, any specific roads or areas where we want to see a focus due to concerns about safety. We can have that
Yep.
discussion at committee.
Absolutely, for sure. And then I will incorporate, so I guess more specifically, thank you, Mayor, that was well put. If it's a concern for the community, it's a concern for me, and it's in the spreadsheet, right? I'm your mirror of your concerns into the data, and therefore the recommended spending to achieve those things. So now moving forward in your updated AMP, you'll say to address the condition needs of your roads is $500,000 a year for the next few years. And to address the functional performance deficiencies of your roads, it's this much money. And we can look at specifically this segment, this project in this year.
Okay, and that would be very helpful because budget years, sometimes there are other budget pressures, and that'll allow council to balance those needs, wants, and address safety issues and prioritize
Absolutely.
what's important to the community.
Absolutely.
So we will get there. We're at a really good starting point here, and we will get there.
Absolutely. And it's the same conversation I was saying with the facilities, where the people who are looking at them don't know whether you want to keep it or not. They're just saying, I'm going in with blinders. This is how much to fix this thing. And if we say, yeah, but no one goes in there once a month, and we're not even going to keep it, so we don't need to do any of this stuff. That's, again, so it's not a concern to you. It's not a concern in the AMP. So it's the same thing. We can add things in or take things out as we agree that it matches the preferences of each community. That's really what we're about, is reflecting the individual wants and needs of a community in the asset management plan.
Okay, great. Nick, do you want to continue then?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So roads, glad we had that chat. I knew that there was, based on the last discussion, I see a lot of road need studies. Some of them do get into small shoulders, narrow shoulders, those sorts of things. But for the most part, they're just fix the stuff that's too bumpy. Okay. So that's your roads and your facilities. Those are your two largest asset groups. If you go back to the summary, they represent something like 90% of your total infrastructure portfolio. And again, this is talking tax supported assets, what we're talking about today. So from there, just to show you the other inventories, that it's the same information is here. So here's all of your parks assets, playground equipment with your performance last year, the performance this year, 2 park equipment replacement needs. So again, just to give you a sense of the granularity of all the data that's behind all these graphs. Here's all your fleet assets. Here's all your IT assets and the need to move to Office 365, or, we've had a discussion around the poor Wi-Fi and that sort of thing, but it's all here. This is your fire, excluding facilities and fleet. So that's an important thing. When someone says, why is the number for fire so low? It's just the equipment, extrication equipment, bunker gear, that sort of stuff. So no, the facility building, the fire halls are with facilities, and the fire apparatus, as they call it, or the trucks, are with fleet. Okay, waste disposal, and then transportation is your everything that's not roads that has to do with transportation. So it's your sidewalks, It's your public parking lot, it's your walking trails, it's the boat launch, it's your street lights. So it's everything. We call it road right of way. It's, you know, between the right of way of the road that's not your traveled road surface. And so the sidewalks are the one thing, because I remember, you know, flipping through that downtown Barry's Bay active transportation master plan, for lack of a better phrase. And so again, no kind of dollar signs in that study yet, but this is another thing. As soon as there is a plan to say we're going to do this segment and that segment, and it's going to be this, and they're going to be 5-foot sidewalks, with whatever the plan is, we'll update this to reflect the plan for what needs to happen in downtown Barry's Bay. Okay, so this is where we like to start with asset management, because this is our snapshot of what we know right now. This is the current performance. We can feel things. We've looked at stuff. We've said, okay, this is what we can tell right now, which things are in good, fair, poor. So that's always where we start with asset management plans. And in our report, that's where we start our reports, as we explain, here's the current performance, here's the distribution, and here is it in dollars and in the table. And then we get into this idea of forecasting spending. So last time I was up there, I gave you a sense of what that looked like. And now I'm happy to announce that we've got all your assets in the tool that we have access to internally at Aqua. So here's your example of your roads assets. So here's every road segment again. Flipping through, here is your graph. And this is the spending profile over here on these 25-year forecasts. And if we spend this amount of money, this is the performance profile we expect to see. And I'll just do this sort of, you know, magic tricks here to show you what I've done to arrive at the answer in the report. You know, I don't expect everyone to follow along with specifically what I'm doing, but what I'm doing now is saying, what if I only spent 200,000 a year on the roads? What would that do? And you can see here a lot more red materializing over time. And we can say, okay, that's not the right thing. Let's say that's 200 is not enough money. Paste these down here, and we can say, so how that, and that's how I get to the numbers that I've recommended in your plan for every asset group. So I have one of these files set up for every asset group that's in the plan. They explicitly match, I call them forecasts. So within the forecast here, you can see here's the updated ones. And within each one of these, you'll have this same file with the assets that are in the inventory. And what this lets us do is there's two things happening here. Assets are deteriorating as they age. And then as we spend money, assets go from red to green, and it analyzes those two competing factors to say, what does the plan look like? And we can get a bit more specific. This was sort of the tool I showed you last time, but what we really like about the tool we're using now is that we can get into some very specific programming. So let's say this is next year, and we know we are going to do Hopefield Road, but it's only going to be $300,000. Then we can just change that and put in a budget of $300,000. Call that our plan for next year. We're going to do one project, and we lock that in. And then I can show you over here on this graph. Once this cranks through, you'll see that we're now spending only $300,000 next year just on that Hopefield Road, and now it's just estimating what we would do next. So if we don't explicitly lock it in and say, okay, we know this is the plan, it will estimate what it thinks is the worst, and then say you'd assume you would do that. But really what we do is try and dial in the next year or 2 or 3 as appropriate. And so that can be something I think you can appreciate. Every year you're trying to program in like this is more work. And then at some point, the uncertainty on what you're going to do 5 years from now is a head scratcher. So next year, like on the water and wastewater, it explicitly matches Ashley's major maintenance plan, because we know right now the latest plan. And so we can sort of do that locking in thing. And so these graphs this analysis that's in the report is a combination of that first phase, which is helps us set the overall spending level by saying, okay, what do I do on average on every year to get the roads that I want? And that's how we get the 500,000 number. And then let's lock in, as we narrow to the next few years, let's really focus in on the year-to-year budgets. And so if I showed you just quickly your facilities one, you'll see that it matches the discussions that Amanda and I have been having about the plan to finance the PYJCC slab and board project next year. using internal financing tools. You'll see if Excel decides to cooperate that in the future forecast here, you can see 2022, we've got our 1.2 million here, and then we're spending 400,000 a year. So that's why when we say it's about 400,000 a year over the next few years to check these facility needs off your list, but you still can lock in your one project or your 1 year, which is higher than usual spending. Yes, Amanda, I see a hand. Sorry, I'm
Oh, I
not supposed
can't.
to ask the question. Sorry, Mayor.
It's fine. I can't see Amanda. So Amanda, go ahead.
Yes, through you, Chair. So, and Nick and I were discussing, it would be good that once we report all of the spending on the infrastructure, the assets, then we can provide a report to council, annually, the state of the assets, or so that we can see as the bars move up or down and where we're at. So I just wanted to.
Right, absolutely. Totally. So what you're going to see is that this is to give you a sense, this is your past capital spending. So what we've done is gone through your financial system data. Again, so this is a row by row analysis of what was this thing and what was it spent on. But this gives you a sense of the kind of assets, and you have been spending about 1.6 million a year on average over the past 12 years. And so what Amanda is saying is that next year we'll put 2021 on here, and we'll start adding these graphs every year. We add what we actually spent on capital, and then we can compare to, again, what we always know in asset management is what's the performance that year. So we'll say, here's what we know it was in 2021. We spent this, we know we spent this in 2021. Now here's the performance next year and what we spent next year. And we start to create what we call a cost to performance relationship, or spending to performance. We're able to, over time, bring even more, I guess, certainty to these types of forecasts, because as they self-calibrate in a sense, where as we start to figure out where we spend money, then we can start to get a sense of how we really dial in these modeling parameters, even with more precision moving forward. Okay, so that's
Nick. So all of that is going to lead to a better ability to do financial planning.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Both long-term financial planning with respect to knowing what goalposts you're trying to hit with respect to funding by asset group, and also helping with the short-term financial planning of what are the strategies, internal financing, pay-as-you-go, debt, grants, all those things. So it helps with both the short-term, what's the right plan to fund the thing we need to do, plus what's the overall plan for how we're going to get the right spending numbers in totality. So, I think from what I've seen, and you're in a relatively good position, because the average forecasted need is, less than or right at what you've been spending. So your average has been 1.6 million, but I note that there's a lot of big grants you've got for your big road projects. But your forecasted long-term capital need is about 1.1 million a year on tax supported assets. Now that's an average annual number. Obviously with your big facility improvements in the next few years, you could well be above that average number, but that gives you a sense of what your sort of long-term goalposts are. And obviously with the things we're hearing about, and seeing about inflation these days, this is your in current dollars forecast. So it's like 1.1 million in 2021 dollars. If we do start to see, inflation at, maintain at a high level, then obviously that 1.1 will need to inflate with inflation. Okay, so that's your what we have been spending, and then we really compare that to, sorry, this is what you have been spending down here. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So you have been spending 1.6, you need to spend 1.1. So we say, wait a minute, like this looks good. So I do think you're in a good spot, but the important piece to point out is, I know there's a lot of lines on this graph, but the bars represent expenditures and the lines represent revenues. So what you look at is your gray is your baseline. This is your operating expenditures for staff and keep the lights on and all that kind of stuff. And your orange line here is your own source revenue. So this is your user fees and your tax levy. And so your own revenue has been covering your operational costs. But what you see here with both the red line is your own source plus your unconditional grants. So that would be your OSIF funding and your gas tax, where you don't have to make grant applications, or you just get it through a funding formula. And then the difference between the red and the black would be your conditional grants or your one-off grants that you apply and get. So your entire capital program over the last 20 years or 12 years has been funded through grants, not through your own source revenue. So moving forward, you're going to continue to be highly reliant on your unconditional grants from the provincial government and your conditional grants from both the provincial and federal governments to fund your capital program. So, you're in good shape. Those numbers seem like they're going to be able to cover you moving forward, notwithstanding, the big spikes you're seeing on the facilities. So, the from a long-term sustainable funding level, those formulas, and obviously with inflation, they're going to keep going up. And we've also, recognized that they're changing the funding formula in your OSIF. There was a note that came out that said it's now going to reference replacement costs in your asset management plan. So we're making sure that we have, to the councillor's question around, should we have high replacement costs for a facility or low replacement costs for a facility? Well, if your OSIF funding is based on how much stuff you own by replacement cost, that's, putting the $806,000 number for the library would be in your best position, I guess, your advantageous position to make it as high as reasonably possible. But your insurance values, or in your insurable insurance costs will obviously be impacted by a number you pick as well. So there's two competing factors there, but I guess I would just note that they are competing factors. And so if your insurance company we had these discussions around, can you insure just an amount of payouts? Can I just insure $2 million in assets and not have to insure my entire portfolio? Then that allows you perhaps to have the high replacement costs without impacting your insurance premiums.
But there's risk associated with that.
Right, and there's risks on your insurance side. So I think it still is a discussion with the insurers. We've had it internally with Aqua because we have within our Maximo system replacement cost, and we've said if I think the plant's $8 million, because if you had to replace the whole plant, it would be $8 million. But it's got a lot of concrete that's not going to need to be replaced. So can I not have an insurance value of $2 million, even though I think the replacement cost is $8 million? And our insurers are saying that is appropriate. And I've talked to some municipal insurers, say City of Waterloo, for bigger places that do insure the pool of payouts, not the replacement cost of each facility individually. So that is a conversation with your insurers that, but I can just kind of help provide that context. So moving forward, like I said, you're relying on your grants, but the grants are unconditional. They're attached to funding formulas now. They're likely to be sustained in their current form for the foreseeable future. So if they continue to increase with inflation and match inflation pressures that we're going to see, so just through the grapevine, we heard that coagulant price at the plants are going to go up 40% in 2022. So I know we're hearing 5% inflation, but really we're waiting to see where it hits us. If it starts to hit you on roads, or it starts to hit you on something where you're seeing more than 4 or 5%, and your OSIF or your gas tax isn't going up at those levels, then you're going to really start to feel the pinch of your grants aren't keeping pace with your construction cost increases, and then we'll be into maybe the picture isn't quite as good as it is right now. But as of right now, it seems like you're in relatively decent shape with the amount of funding that you're expected to get moving forward.
Okay, Nick, can you tell me where the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund is in this equation? Is it considered part of our, what looks like maybe the gray line? Is it part of the gray, or is it part of those unconditional grants?
That's a great question. Let me just see if I can pull up my spreadsheet. I think in the report that I was provided, Amanda, I think it just says Ontario unconditional grants and Ontario specific grants. So I don't think I have the details of which was gas tax or OSIF or another fund.
It would be part of that unconditional Ontario grants.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, thanks,
So
Amanda.
Yeah.
So we do have to be mindful that some of these grants are going to be reviewed by the current provincial government, and the amounts or the funding formulas may change. Should that be the case, then that will promptly shift the burden from the provincial government onto the property tax base.
Correct.
Because we have to
100%.
maintain our assets. So if any change occurs in the funding that we receive, clearly we have to find a way to make that up in order to look after our assets.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it is because it's a financial risk you can't control, right? And so if something happens and everyone says that's it, these programs have to go, or they're scaled back, or I think a lot of people are talking about gas tax, and if people start using less gas, well, then what does that do to the gas tax fund for infrastructure? And so those things are out there, and they are a huge risk, and particularly if they don't increase with inflation, and we see big inflationary pressures. So that's definitely a point of concern or risk that's there on your financial strategy, because it's outside of your direct control other than political lobbying.
Okay, so one other question I had in regards to what's where in these bars. So currently, we do budget amounts that we put aside into reserves to ensure that our reserves are there for us. Is the amounts that we're budgeting into reserves included in the gray?
So
I'm
those are
assuming?
included in the blue bars.
Are they?
Capital expense. Yes. So expenditures, contributions to reserve. So they're in, I can just flip this for you quickly, but this is how they kind of look on your capital things. So they have capital reserve, and these are your contributions to, and so they're in your expenditures. So what they are, I can take them out, but this is, these are your total capital expenditures. So here's your capital reserve contribution versus your actual capital expenditure.
Okay, so in the blue then is where we see the money we set aside every year in the budget
Oh,
to
sorry.
go into reserves.
Whoops, sorry. Orange. It's actually here. I didn't even read my own graph. Yes. The orange is how much you're contributing to reserves every year. That's your orange. Capital reserve
Okay.
contribution. So you have an
Okay.
operating cost, a capital expense, and then the orange is a reserve contribution. So it shows up as an expenditure, right?
Okay, no, that's fine. So that this also then indicates that we do have to continue to do that in order to fund the assets that we're looking after. I mean,
So
you're telling us we're in a good position, but I think that good position is dependent upon two key things: that the funding that we do receive doesn't change, and that we continue to do what we're doing.
Correct. Yeah, you're in a good position because of staff who know what they're doing, and it puts you in a good position, right? And so continuing to effectively keep an eye on reserves, plan for the future with getting this high quality data that you've got on the roads, notwithstanding the challenges with the road need study, but the buildings. So you're getting your data, you're tracking your spending, and you've been, yes, making sure that you have healthy reserves. So Amanda and I've been through your financial information review, I don't know, I want to call it report card or whatever, where they give you risk ratings on what your reserve holdings are and what your debt holdings are. So you got low debt, you got high reserves. You can certainly afford, I think it was something like 5 or 6 million in reserves. So I think you can afford to spend the money from internal financing sources on the arena, but you certainly wouldn't have very many more big projects in there before you started to not have appropriate reserves, where you started to see a higher risk rating on the reserves. And so you've got your risk plan set up where you've got healthy reserves and low debt. And so you could, if something big and unforeseen were to happen, you've got the rainy day fund. You still have the reserves, and you can always take on the debt if you need be. So, I see some communities that are running it a bit tighter, a little lower on reserves, a little higher on debt. And, I get a little more concerned because if something big happened, they really couldn't afford it with their own financing sources. So, if the province called you up and said, we're turning the tap off on some of these funding programs, then you would have, the short-term room to adjust and find out the plan to finance the stuff you still want to do, and commit to maintaining healthy reserves and keeping debt at a manageable level.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was really wanted to understand this and where the things we're doing fit into it and what the impact would be if there's some change, because it's looking good. I think the key is to stay on target and stay on track with what we've been doing. And certainly having all this data is going to help us to hone in on some things that we may not have identified that do need to be done, and to to help us to build a better understanding of what our competing needs are so that we can make the decisions.
Right.
Obviously, any council going forward isn't going to be able to just do anything and everything. There are choices that have to be made. And I think this data is providing us with what we need to be able to make those choices across the spectrum of our assets, which is really great. I'm really excited by this.
Absolutely, yeah. So that, like you said, that's the value of it, is to help with those, we'll call it cross asset group trade-offs. You know, what happens if we put the money here versus here, or if we get the grant, what would we do here? And so the purpose is to provide that, you know, the start of a journey here where you're going to have this every year, and then, you know, you look back and say, wow, this really helps us decide what to do. And that's part of what this asset management objectives are really trying to do, is to help facilitate decision making. It's never meant to say thou shalt spend this amount of money on your community, because you're deciding what to spend on your community, not this plan.
Councillor Wilmer, I think, has a question.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a couple of comments, or a comment and a question maybe. And I'm going to say, first of all, this is an excellent report, and it really, I find it very, very helpful. I think what I like too is being able to look at some of the historical information from the past 10 years and see where we are, because you can interpret that so many different ways. And I think when we look at, we have been spending 1.6, and it's good news going forward to see that to stay on track, we only have to spend 1.1, but that 1.6 is a little misleading when you look at it, because out of the last 10 years, there really have only been 3 years where we've been over, and 2 we've been way over in the last 3 years. Otherwise, for the other 7, we were underfunding our facilities and whatnot. And
Yep.
So I think you have to look at the history too to see it. And I think there's large grants in 218, 220 that are probably responsible for those big jumps.
Mhm.
So I find that very interesting. And my other point was more when you had the transportation segment up on the screen. I noticed the Pog Lake docks, but were the Barry's Bay and Combermere docks and boat launches included in that too?
Yeah, so they're in the parks. They're in the parks.
Okay.
Yeah.
They are in that. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, why they're not, yeah, so they're in the parks, not, I think there was a good reason for why they would be, maybe that should be with the parks. I have the entrance sign with the transportation. Yeah, maybe that Pog Lake should go over with the parks inventory. But yeah, parks has all the other boat launches are in there: tennis court, bleachers, change rooms, rink lighting, public boat launch, Combermere. Yeah, they're all in there.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure that they hadn't been missed. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have paved the parking lot in 2020 of the Combermere boat launch. So that's, yeah, we're tracking that stuff.
Thank you. No, and it's a very good report.
I think, Councillor Wilmer, you're actually, you're spot on with identifying the 2 large grants that are obviously showing up in the graphs that Nick has provided for us. And I guess it's that average spending concept, right? There will be years when we would probably spend less going forward, even with all the asset management information. It'll depend on what needs to be done in that year. The asset management plan will identify things to look at. Always you look at whatever it is and decide, is it good for another year? Does it need to be done?
Right.
But then there are always things that come up as well that were planned for a few years down the road that do suddenly need to be done. So while our spending may go up and down, as long as we're following the plan and we're getting the jobs done, the average will end up being 1.1 million per year, right?
Correct.
So I think that's the thing we have to focus in on, the importance of the information in the plan, what it's telling council, and the decisions it puts before council in order to be making good decisions that are looking after our assets.
Right.
Councillor Wilmer.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's why I was trying to point it out, because obviously a year like next, when we do the arena, the 1.2 is going to put it well over the average by the end of the year. But the next year we may spend less, but I think it's important that we maintain the plan and we keep on track. So 10 years down the road, we'll see that we did average 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 on our assets. So, I think it's an excellent tool to have, and it will be really beneficial.
Absolutely. Sue.
Yeah, it was just a clarification. So I'm looking at the financing strategy. So page 11, where it states there's 5 factors that are taken into consideration. I was just wondering, so number 2, where it says internal financing using reserves, is that where if there's specific reserves for a special purpose? So I was going to reference the wharf as well. So we have revenue of the SRA, which was a recent council decision that those revenues from the sales of SRAs be redirected instead of general reserves for the purpose of, same as what we use under section 42 for cash in lieu, that it'd be reallocated like to recreational purposes, including rehabilitation of wharfs. So I'm assuming those special reserves for that special purpose fall under number 2.
They do, yeah. And so I guess maybe I'd say something more broadly about internal financing, is that I've seen a number of smaller communities being creative, or using their own I guess knowledge of what's available to finance projects. And so I was doing a project, I won't mention their smaller community, but they're basically using cash reserves to pay for a water project, and then are going to internally just transfer back and finance it internally over time. And so they're able to have a more the repayment terms are their own discretion to make, so they can adjust them. They're not locked into a debenture repayment schedule. And then they're also, basically only losing the cost of interest. Their financing cost is just a lost interest that they otherwise would have from having the extra $1 million in cash. And so it's meant to be a broader internal financing, which is everything you just sort of said, Sue, which is all of the options available to you internally with the money you've got that is appropriate to use for the things you deem appropriate. Go for it. That's your prerogative. Yeah, that's what we'd encourage, is if you've got the money and you can find out how to, do it and reduce the burden on the taxpayers, then we're all for that.
Okay, if I may, a subsequent question. Just so we appreciate this because we see the validity of making this a living document. We update it with all the changes, rehabilitation yearly, present it to council yearly. So as we do that, so when we bring back the yearly review, is there a cost of living that is incorporated yearly to that document?
So I've been putting in a 2% cost of living increase. So your costs from last year went up 2%. Your roads were 2019, they're 4% higher. So I will be doing a default 2% increase on cost of living adjustments to the capital every year, to the replacement cost of things, and or inflation as we see it on construction indices. So CPI isn't the best measure of inflation for the type of infrastructure that the capital plan is referring to. There are other cost indices, non-residential building and construction indices, that look at the basket of goods in their inflation indexes, skilled labor, unskilled labor, those sorts of things, concrete, steel. And so that's what we're tracking a little more closely in the asset management worlds than the CPI stuff, because we haven't seen, other than the short-term hit on a lot of lumber during the pandemic and those sorts of things, which have largely come back down, we haven't seen a lot of huge inflation pressures hitting tenders on the water and wastewater industry yet. That's the kind of industry that I follow more closely with Aqua. But we're certainly, as you start to close a road tender and it comes in, or if it comes in more than what you had thought, then we can certainly start to bring in larger than, cost of living adjustments to those replacement costs.
Okay, so the yearly report would have some notation saying that there's inflationary of such percent added. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Nick, just so we have this, the report that was attached to the agenda that the public can see, but I'm wondering if we could just include, having not seen this before, I didn't get an opportunity to have input to just suggest. It would be important, I think, for the public's understanding of this report to just identify what's in facilities, what's in fleet, what's in parks, what's in transportation. Just, and it can stay, as this report comes year over year, being updated or whenever it comes updated, having that there is going to help with understanding. And it certainly would have helped with my understanding, because a lot of the questions I had were around, well, what's in transportation?
Sure.
What's
Yep.
in fire when it's such a small number? And you answered this already, but I'm just thinking if we could include that, I think it would be helpful.
Yep.
The other thing I just wanted to identify is under population. Oh, which page was it?
Yes.
15, page 15, you've used the population of Barry's Bay, which is not the population of Madawaska Valley.
Absolutely. I thought that was
So
maybe it just
now
references Barry's Bay, but no, absolutely.
this is the
Yep.
population of Barry's Bay and that
Okay.
history.
Yep,
The
yep.
challenge you have with the population of Madawaska Valley is that since 2001, it's actually been going down, but that's not what's happening.
Right.
Because we have this seasonal component that isn't being captured in the census data. And so the demand on services is increasing because of the strong seasonal component. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe just take a look at that for future reports, so that we don't look like we're just looking at Barry's Bay, which is
Yep.
not at all what this is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I just pulled this from the water, which now that because it's just the service population, that would make sense.
For
So
the
the
water.
other,
Mhm.
I mean, I guess the note, just from discussions I've had with Ashley around, the development pressures and the need to look at, where growth might happen within the community. As soon as you have, better planning information, or as we start to increase the quality through the CGIS tool and looking at parcels and trying to estimate, where do you really think the population is going, or if you enter, I threw in the kind of requisite reference to development charges. I don't know where that stands in the community, but we're seeing smaller communities start to look at that as, will this make sense for us? And through a DC background study, you're going to typically, the Hemstons and the Watsons who do them have demographers on staff who will, even for smaller communities, help with a growth forecast. So that's absolutely the most important piece is like to your point, Mayor, is what are the demands on services that we're seeing? And so anything, even though they have the section on growth planning, it could, also say like I would think registrations for hockey would be equally relevant to put in something like this, right? Or something, or traffic counts through Barry's Bay in the summer, or something that's referencing that is an increasing demand on services. I think that's where we can really build out this section over time and make it reflect what it really is supposed to do, which is have an eye towards not just fixing the stuff we've got, but making sure we're skating to where the puck's going to be, so to speak, and planning for that, the additional impact on services.
Okay, great. One final thing I thought of when I was looking at this and looking at all the information you provided was how exciting it would be for the things that can be GIS'd, identified location, because we're doing some wonderful work on mapping. And if things in the asset management plan is, for example, culvert 427, which is on such and such a road, if it could be identified and pinpointed, and that would be probably through the work of our staff if we don't have all that information. Can you then get that into the spreadsheets? Because we may be able to meld this and get some fantastic mapping through working with the mapping that we're doing and taking that to another level in the next few years.
For sure. So I can say with certainty that your next water and wastewater asset management plan will be able to show you the red, green, and yellow for your pipes in a map. So we've got the field in your CGIS data on performance score rationale. We just have to circle back with the CGIS crew and then get them to make that map. So the limitation is having the GIS data there. But once you're talking about, say, your parks as an example, it's only adding a few more dots, right? It's not like adding every single pipe underground or every single hydrant. It becomes, the rest of your GIS is probably as easy as the water, wastewater that you just did. So there's not, you've certainly come a long way. And so, yes, absolutely, it can be connected back. And I think the asset inventory that we've got, whether you have one dot for every facility, and then you can shade the triangle or a circle or pie of that facility by good, fair, poor, and you can make a nice map. So all possible as we move forward, for sure.
Okay, I'm even thinking of things, and I am talking down the road, like being able to see on a map where every street light is.
Yep, absolutely.
And then being able to call up that street light. And I don't know if this can connect well enough, but to be able to click on that street light and get the information for that street light, when it was last replaced, if it needed a servicing. Because I think we're on the cusp of putting it all together here, and that's what's super exciting.
Yeah. So anything where like I said, the barrier is the GIS data. So once you have a dot for every street light in GIS, we can update this so that we have a dot for a row for every dot in our spreadsheet.
Okay.
Sure. Yep.
So this is for the future, but I'm very excited by this. I can't wait.
Good.
Are there any questions for Nick from council? I know I can't see Councillor Bromwich or Councillor Schulist. Any questions, either of you? Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. To you, Nick, this is wonderful news. We've just jumped ahead about 20 years in technology, and I think it's going to be a fantastic reference for all our staff and council to make decisions on, especially at budget time. And great work, guys. Just want to say thank you very much.
Thanks. I'll say thanks to Amanda, because it was all her hard work, and we spent a lot of hours looking at spreadsheets. So
that's when she's in her element, though.
Me too.
Sue.
I wanted to add as well that I think council should be congratulated for allowing staff to move forward with these good foundational reviews that we've been doing with the CGIS project to digitize water and wastewater, allowing us to move forward with the building condition assessment, which was made a lot easier with the assistance of our admin planning and building, Andy Poplinski, and allowing us, because a lot of that data from the building condition assessment allowed us to be added to this asset management plan as well. And the development charges for council moving ahead with that review. And everything is timely with the operational service delivery review, which is just about complete. And again, for all of the staff that have applied for the funding and using the modernization funding very wisely to move us forward in that. So I think it's all around. It's not one individual. I think that it's been a 2-year in the making to build a really strong foundation for where we're going. So I think hats off to everyone.
Yes, absolutely. This is definitely a team approach, and all the parts are coming together beautifully, which is what's so exciting. Are there any questions from any of the members of staff for Nick? Anyone, or any comments from staff? Okay, and there's Amanda.
No questions, just a comment. Nick's been wonderful, and you can see how passionate he is when he speaks about these spreadsheets, and you can tell he loves what he's doing, and it's just great working with him. He's so knowledgeable, and I look forward to working with him, and I'm sure Hillary does too, within the next couple of years, making sure all of this continues and we continue on this path of updating our assets and updating our reporting to council, and making sure everybody has a very thorough understanding of the state of our assets. So thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Amanda.
Well, I think that's the number one thing. This is living information that is evolving and changing daily, and being able to stay on top of it is going to be fantastic.
Right. It's the difference between we're doing asset management and planning now, not writing asset management plans, right?
Yeah,
the plan is just a snapshot, but we keep it going all year long.
Exactly. We had an asset management plan that gathered a bit of dust on a shelf, and this is a whole different animal. This is going to be so useful. So
like the report's really the tip of the iceberg, right? The processes and that happen underneath are really what makes it valuable in the long run.
Well, and I appreciate, Nick, that you're working with our staff to build on, and to be able to build on that, and to capture some of the uniqueness of what goes on in Madawaska Valley and what we have. So that's that's hugely important.
Well, it's
Sue.
refreshing for me to work with small communities after spending a career working with big consultants and consultants with big communities and staff who don't live in their communities and don't really care, you know, at the end of the day about their community because they're just bureaucrats. And I find it very refreshing to be able to help small communities like this. And I'm enjoying my time here at Aqua a lot.
Great, thanks, Nick. Sue, did you?
Yeah, just wanted to add as well that I'm sure, and I don't want to speak for Hillary, but the roads need review. The more we discuss it and the more we know what we want out of it and how it plays such a crucial role in the asset management plan. And having spoken to CGIS, being excited about as soon as you have a report, you can pretty much put pen to paper and have that records management electronically as to what we can do with it. So I'm sure we'll be talking to you more about what we can do with that roads need review as well.
Yeah, for sure, because it's really helpful, you know, when you're looking at a pavement quality index score and you can look at a picture and say, is this road good enough for our community or not? And then if yes, we can use that, right? Road need studies and engineers, typical engineers have a hard time with that filter, and that's what we're here to do. Is so let's get some realism and say, look at something good enough or not, and then we'll really be able to calibrate the roads for you.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to reference more what you had added as something that could be done. So yes, the roads need study is the technical engineering world as to the quality, the condition, replacement, but how we can add our own municipal touch to that as it pertains to, you know, extension to if it is that health and safety and or areas where we would like to consider being shovel ready for other projects.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's great.
Okay, any final, anyone want any comments or questions for Nick? I am not seeing any. Okay, Nick, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Now, I don't know, are you staying with us for our in-camera session or not?
I am not. No, this is
Okay.
this is the end of the line for me.
Come on.
So enjoy the rest of your meeting, everyone. I've got some homework to make a bit of polish on the report. We'll get that across the finish line. And then, like I said, I don't think you'll need to hear from me again. You can just approve it, and Gwen, I'll confirm with the regulation what kind of resolution we need from council. But I won't see you before Christmas. Have a wonderful Christmas. Thanks
Thank you,
again.
Nick.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Take care, everyone.
Yes, well, thanks, Nick. Take care.
Bye.
Okay. So that was really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to, you know, having the public having a better understanding as well, because it does make it fairly straightforward. All right, so if I look on our agenda, we don't have anything else other than an in-camera session. So we have no new business or unfinished business, right?
No, Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So we will go to our in-camera session. The recommendation is that the meeting enters in-camera session to discuss matters pertaining to the security of the property of the municipality or local board, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, Ontario Municipal Act 2001, Chapter 25, Section 239, 2A and C. Number 1 will be the building condition assessments, and number 2 is the surplus property working group results. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Schulist. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay.